It was WrestleMania 18 live from Toronto, Canada, and after 9 long years, Hulk Hogan was back in the WWE. And on the grandest stage of them all, him and The Rock tore the house down. And although The Rock got the 1, 2, 3 and his arm raised, even he knew that night that Hulk Hogan was the one walking out of Skydome, the real winner of the match. Because despite walking into the match as a heel, despite being booked to lose the match, despite being 49 years old, Hulkamania was about to run wild in the 2000s. And for the next 4 years, a brand new generation of wrestling fans were about to get the ultimate Hulk Hogan experience. From a world title win to that doesn't work for me brother and everything in between, Hulk Hogan's run in the 2000s was so damn fascinating and so damn hilarious, it definitely deserves a look back at. So back in 2002, as soon as WrestleMania 18 was over and Hogan ditched the NWO, Hogan was back, and before you knew it, the company began pushing him like he was their biggest star, like it was 1987 all over again. And for good reason. Hogan was back, and after 9 long years, the face of wrestling coming home was a huge story, and every week the crowds were going crazy for this man. It was as if Elvis had come back from the dead or something, and he basically did. And once he brought back the red and yellow, it was a wrap, because the next thing you know, despite losing at WrestleMania 18, despite being a 49-year-old man with bad hips, bad back, bad everything, Hogan pulled off arguably his greatest masterclass and walked back into the WWE, and a month after WrestleMania 18, beat Triple H for the WWE Championship. Triple H, the man who at this point had cemented himself clearly as Vince's one and only son, sorry Shane, his golden child, the man who had just had an historic comeback at MSG, who had just won the Rumble, who closed WrestleMania over Hogan, who had just won the title and was in the beginning of his much anticipated face run, had to do the job, the 1, 2, 3, for the real Triple H brother, for Hollywood Hulk Hogan, dude. Just 1 month after main eventing WrestleMania, Triple H was out here getting leg dropped by this big orange Neanderthal, and this instantly reminded everyone that it doesn't matter if it's the 80s, 90s, or the 2000s, doesn't matter if it's Macho Man, Macho Man's wife, Triple H, Gawker, Hogan always goes over. And just like that, Hogan was the WWE champion. And for the 2 weeks that preceded this legendary win, jokes aside, they cemented this return as one for the ages and cemented it as iconic in every way. Once Hogan won the title, he was treated like a god in the cities they went to, even more so than before. One time on an episode of SmackDown in Montreal, they legit gave this man a 10-minute standing ovation, and he was brought to tears. You can just tell he was all like, "Wow, dude, wow." And it all made sense, because it was like, damn, all these kids who grew up with Hogan finally get to see him in the red and yellow again, back home in the company where he belongs. And it was before we knew he was a racist piece of shit, but this was Hogan on top again. All those little Hulkamaniacs were now older, and he was back in the company that he helped make. It was generational. But once the ovations wore off, so did a lot of the luster, and eventually kind of hit everyone that this 49-year-old buffoon is the WWE champion. Yeah, once reality sunk in and every week Hogan was cutting the same promos and getting more and more orange every week, it got rough really fast and the ratings started crashing down, and it definitely hurt inside, and the company started panicking. Next thing you know, it was time to portray Hogan as cool and hip, and he's stealing Undertaker's motorcycle until it stalls on the ramp and he has to do this. Then he gets his own chopper and he's driving it to the ring, and then eventually Undertaker just grabs him and does this. One of the funniest visuals that was supposed to be serious that I've ever seen. Old man Hogan in his little bucket helmet just going for the ride backstage like a kid at Six Flags. Wah, dude, wah. And just as fast as he won the title, it was time for Hogan to drop the title. His reign lasted a month. Hogan and Taker proceeded to have a horrible match at Judgment Day. He barely goes up for the chokeslam and the title reign was over. But honestly, it was the best thing that could have happened for Hogan. He had the title run, the fans loved it, and once the title was dropped, it was like, hey, no more pressure. And for the next few months, he just kind of did his thing. For the rest of 02, he just kind of vibed out. He had a bang with Angle on pay-per-view. He teamed up with the Edge and won the tag team titles. Fans still went crazy for him every week. He beat up Vince. His 02 run, honestly, was pretty fire. Other than the Taker match, it was one heck of a nostalgia run. So when you look at Hogan's run in the 2000s, 02 was no doubt easily the best year. A classic, iconic run that of course came to an end in the most Hogan way possible, when Hogan decided to leave because the company didn't want him to beat Brock Lesnar for the title at Survivor Series 02. Terry, did you really think the company was gonna put the title on you again and have you beat Brock Lesnar? This guy. Hogan left in the summer of 02 and capped off a pretty successful run, and despite him leaving because he wasn't going to beat Lesnar at Survivor Series, he still left after putting Lesnar over. Like I said, all in all, a great run. But ladies and gentlemen, that was 2002. The rest of his run in the 2000s? Let's just say, let the buffoonery begin. Hogan made his return to the company in January of 2003, and instantly it was a whole new ballgame. His first feud back was a match against The Rock. It was time for the WrestleMania rematch, the match that started off this legendary comeback. But this time, things were going to be a little different. See, this time there wasn't going to be a super nostalgic Toronto crowd ready to worship Hogan. This time Hogan wasn't going to be able to manipulate their crowd like only he could and come out the winner just by losing. Nah, this time after working his masterclass last year against The Rock, he was up against Hollywood Rock. Hollywood Rock during his 3-week feud with the Hulkster made Hogan look like the biggest bozo we had ever seen. The Rock with his douchebag character said fuck it and brought his A game, and Hogan looked like a deer in the headlights every single week. Every week Rocky would clown this man. Every week Rocky would destroy him in some way, and every week Hogan just looked more depressed and depressed as the weeks went on. Yo, Rock wouldn't even let this man speak most weeks, and when Hogan did reply, he would reply with the same stupid shit that he's been saying for years, like calling The Rock a jabroni. You called The Rock a jabroni? It got so bad and disrespectful. It got to the point where Hogan, probably in all honesty, should have just shot The Rock. And it all led to No Way Out 2003, where Hollywood Rock was one-on-one against Hogan, and he just trolls this man the entire match. Hogan just got clapped, not physically, but in every other way possible. The Rock was so in his bag this night that the same crowd who was booing him when the match started, they were all over him by the time it was over. And in short, The Rock 100% got his lick back on Hogan. Why, dude, why? So with Hogan absolutely getting embarrassed by The Rock, as was designed, to be fair, it was then time for his Mania feud, and it was then time for a match between the two biggest psychos the wrestling world had ever seen and ever will see, Vince versus Hogan. What a time it was to be alive. Two 50-year-old men who were so juiced up on roids that their piss probably would have melted a testing cup were gonna kill each other in a street fight at WrestleMania. Vince wanted to kill Hulkamania. He wanted to kill what he thought was his creation, and these two old men for weeks leading to Mania just produced straight comedy. Hogan was out here botching his promos, calling himself a gay guy.
If you actually think that I was just the right gay guy,
Vince was Vince and doing stuff like this, and this was it. 20 years in the making, Hogan versus Vince at WrestleMania, and yo, these two crazy killed each other. Yo, what can I even say? This match is a banger. See, before we had Jake Paul to give senior citizens CTE, we had them do it themselves at WrestleMania, and we had Hogan and Vince on pay-per-view giving each other so much CTE, it didn't make any sense. Say what you want to say about these two idiots, because they are definitely idiots, but these two juiced up maniacs back in 2003 on this night, they understood the assignment and they killed each other. They were out here swinging chair shots, bleeding everywhere, the crowd was going wild. Vince McMahon thought he was Matt Hardy at one point and decided to do this. This match had no reason to be this fire, but it is a classic in every way. Only in wrestling would you ever see anything like this. And after 20 minutes of just amazing nonsense, Hogan got the 1, 2, 3, and Hulkamania was gonna live on forever and ever, or so we thought. So after WrestleMania 19 and 03, the company was in a weird spot, right? They had Hogan in the company for a little over a year. He had his dream match with The Rock. They even had a rematch. He became world champion. He didn't want to lose to Lesnar, so scrap that. They ran the Vince match, and it reached a point where they didn't really know what to do with him. So they decided to do the most amazing yet goofiest thing we had ever seen. So after WrestleMania, Vince fired Hogan and banished him from the WWE, just for the next week Stephanie McMahon to announce that she had just signed a new wrestler to SmackDown, Mr. America. Alright, yo, listen, I love the Mr. America storyline. This was so stupid, so goofy, so awesome. Like, yeah, geez, I wonder who Mr. America is. It has to be Mark Henry, right? Hogan was gone and Mr. America was running wild on SmackDown, and Vince would try every week to somehow show the world that this man right here was indeed Hogan. So from hiring detectives and hitmen to taking a lie detector test, which by the way, Mr. America did beat. No face, no case. Yes sir, Mr. America beat the case. Vince was unable to prove that this was indeed Hogan. No matter what he did, he tried everything in the book, but he was unable to prove it was Hogan. And if anything, maybe it wasn't, because that lie detector test, it had to be real, because even that test knew that Vince was a pervert.
I am no pervert.
Mr. America, what a time to be alive. One of my favorite lines from this whole era was, "I'm not Hulk Hogan, brother. I'm Mr. America, dude." I mean, on one episode, we saw Hogan at home hours away via satellite in a different state, and then Mr. America appeared in the same episode in front of the people. Like, It really couldn't have been Hogan. Yo, shout out to Mr. America, man. Shout out to Mr. America. What a storyline. What a goofy ass storyline. What an amazing storyline. Sadly though, for us, the Mr. America run wouldn't last long, and by July of 2003, Hogan legit quit the company and went home once again. He was released from his contract not too long after, and after a pretty wild year and a half, the Hogan run of the 2000s at that point was definitely on hiatus for the foreseeable future. And as the years went on and negotiations did take place, it was clear that it was going to take something really special to bring the Hulkster back. And boy, did it. Hogan made his return to the company in 2005, and how do you top Mr. America? Well, let's bring Shawn Michaels in the cut. Hogan came back in 05 for two reasons. The first was to be inducted into the Hall of Fame, and the second was to have another icon versus icon match. Well, this was just a showcase of wrestling at its best. What happens when two wrestlers are put into a program who are infamous for their politics, who are infamous for being hard to deal with and work with, and what happens when one of them has changed, but one of them, despite now being 52 years old, still wants to go over, brother. HBK vs. Hogan kicked off in April of 05 when the two teamed up against Muhammad Hassan and Daivari, and slowly built to the night where HBK kicked Hogan's head off and we were off to the races. For the first time in 6 years, HBK was gonna be a heel and have a trilogy of matches against Hogan. It was icon versus icon, showstopper versus legend, Hogan versus HBK for the first time ever, but little did we know this was definitely gonna be for the last time ever. The original plans for this feud, like I said, were there to be a trilogy where both men would win one match and then it leads to this final classic, good old-fashioned steel cage match. And when Hogan was negotiating his contract to return, he was all the way in, and he was all the way in for a while. So the feud kicked off and HBK was healing it up, and he was dressing up as Hogan, embarrassing him, getting all his shots in, and for a month we got the old Shawn Michaels. It was 90s Shawn Michaels back again for a month or so, and the feud was hot, but this build-up kind of shows everything you need to know about Hogan. See, in the build-up, Hogan didn't do anything memorable, he didn't do anything special, he was totally fine with being embarrassed, Hogan dissing his family, dissing him, making fun of him, dressing up as him. He was down for it all, because he always knew he was going to get his look back when there was time for the actual match. Because all the fun and games were fine in the build-up of the match, but it all came crashing down the night of the match. This was it, buddy. This was one and done tonight. Main event, I go over, leg drop 1, 2, 3, and HBK, well, he simply says bet, and you all know what we got after this. We got 20 minutes of Shawn Michaels in the ring with Hogan acting a damn fool, doing whatever he can to make a mockery of the match, overselling like his life depended on it, overselling like he was on crack again, like it was 1997, flips and flops and just everything you could imagine. What was supposed to be icon versus icon, it became an iconic wrestling meme that's gonna last forever and ever. There is nothing better than Hogan hitting the boot and HBK just dying, and you can just tell by looking at Hogan's face, even he's just like, what are we doing here? Hogan goes away for 2 years, comes back, and this is what he ends up in. And then the funny thing is, we all look at HBK as a legend for this. We're like, wow, HBK really stuck it to Hogan. He really did what he wanted to do. Shout out to HBK for not giving Hogan the match he wanted, but the match he deserved. But it's like, we all know deep down, Hogan doesn't care about anything. Yo, Shawn Michaels could have done anything he wanted. Shawn Michaels could have took his pants off and just started pissing everywhere. Hogan would have not cared. Embarrass him, embarrass his family. So Hogan, all he wants is the 1, 2, 3. Hogan just wants the win, and that's what he got. And you just know Hogan had a blast because it's like, hey, I got the 1, 2, 3, brother. A SummerSlam main event for the ages. What a clown show. What a classic. And once the dust settled, like I said, Hogan still got the win away for another year, who hadn't wrestled in 2 years, got the win over a 40-year-old full-time wrestler who was putting on classics every single month with a solid 5 years. No. Hogan needed the win. I told you the 2000s wrestling fans also got the full Hulk Hogan experience. But with the HBK embarrassment behind him, Mr. Hogan once again went MIA. He disappeared into Venice Beach, and wrestling fans continue to call him out for his politicking and refusal to put anyone over. And it's like, damn, if you're not gonna put HBK over, you're not gonna put anyone over. But Hogan didn't care. He was too busy counting his money. He was ruining his family with his reality show. He didn't care. But 1 year later, Hogan actually had the chance to change the narrative. In the summer of 06, Hogan came back with a golden opportunity. The man who had last year had just pulled off another power play, the man who had become infamous for not putting over younger talent, for always finessing the system, was given a golden opportunity to possibly erase it all and change his reputation. Because 1 year after the SummerSlam 05 debacle, it was going to be at SummerSlam 06, Legend versus Legend Killer, Hulk Hogan versus Randy Orton. After a pretty funny build-up which included Randy Orton trying to finesse Brooke Hogan with a rose and RKOing Hulk Hogan on a car and then pretending like he didn't do it, it wasn't me, it was time for a match between a youngster and an old man. It was a story that wrote itself. It was the legend killer versus the legend killer versus the biggest legend. It was right there for them. And at SummerSlam 06, it was time for the match. Now granted, this match wasn't that hyped up, not at all. This was far from HBK versus Hogan. This was not a main event match. Hell, this was just a random match in the middle of the show. It wasn't even close to main event status. But this still had the chance to be something special. See, this ended up being Hulk Hogan's last match in the WWE, and at this point Hogan was battling injuries. A lot of them. He needed hip surgery, back surgery, knee surgery. He needed all the surgeries, and the man was limping every time he came out to the ring during the build-up, and he was even basically limping at SummerSlam 06. So this wasn't going to be a classic in any way, but how could it be special, you might ask? Well, maybe he might put over the legend killer. Because even if he thought this wasn't going to be his last match, he knew this was going to be one of his last matches. He needed all those surgeries. He was so hurt. If anything, all those reasons just added to why Randy should have hit him with the RKO and get the win. Nobody wanted a classic. Nobody needed a classic. But maybe Hogan for once could do the right thing. Randy at this point was the legend killer, right? He was the man who destroyed countless legends, who went toe-to-toe with Taker and almost won the feud. He was 26 years young. He had his whole future ahead of him. He was almost going to be a guaranteed Hall of Famer. There's no way he was going to fail. And what a win it was going to be for him to beat Hogan at SummerSlam and add him to the list of legends that he killed. Hogan was barely able to walk. He had all the bad stink of what he pulled last year with Shawn Michaels. With one simple loss right here, he could at least say, hey, yeah, back in 06, I put over Randy Orton, dude, a future Hall of Famer. All the stars were aligned for Hogan to do the right thing. 4 years into his run in the 2000s with the WWE, he had the chance to really add some points to his legacy, and all he had to do was lose. Sorry dude, leg drop 1, 2, 3, brother. Hogan beats the legend killer. Apparently Randy was able to kill every other legend he ever came across, but couldn't kill the legend of the Beach Walrus. And in the most forgettable 10-minute match in the middle of SummerSlam 06 with a knee that barely worked, a back that barely worked, Hogan again got his damn win. And it's like, yo, are we really surprised? Hogan with a body that barely works, who by the way looked depressed the entire match. You can see it on his face. Even he looked depressed, so of course Randy looked depressed. But Hogan still couldn't lay down for Randy, the 26-year-old legend killer. Are we really surprised? I mean, how does the saying go again? Hogan is the type of guy to sleep on top of his blanket because he doesn't want it to go over him. And yo, to me, the funniest part about this is this was a 10-minute match, right? So it wasn't an epic match. It wasn't some back and forth classic. This was nothing. This was a nothing match. But still, Terry, did you really have to kick out of his RKO? I can't. He just had to kick out of the RKO and then win like 2 minutes later in a 10-minute match. What are we? I can't. Hogan at this point was shameless. Honestly, Hogan was always shameless. Hogan got the win, and this ended up being his last WWE match ever. And in an industry where you usually give back to the industry on your way out, where that is the standard more often than not, nah, leg drop, dude. Obviously, in the grand scheme of things, it's like it's funny to laugh at because did it really matter for Randy? Not really. His career went on fine. It probably went the same had he won anyway, but still, it would have added so much to Hogan's legacy for putting Randy over, and it still would have been cool. Like, yeah, Randy killed the legend. Nope, sorry, not allowed. And just like that, Hogan's 2000s weird ass run came to an end. From losing his first pay-per-view match back to winning the world title a month later, from Triple H to leaving the company because he didn't want to lose to Lesnar twice, to Hollywood Rock, to CTE Mania with Vince, Mr. America, HBK doing this, to beating Orton just because why not? Hulk Hogan in the 2000s, I told you, a whole new generation of wrestling fans definitely got the full Hulk Hogan experience. And looking back at it, it was hilarious. This is the Hogan that I grew up on. This is the Hogan that I remember. And of course, during this run, I had no idea that this was going on backstage. Like when he was beefing HBK and Orton, I didn't really know. I didn't even know that HBK was overselling. But when you look back at it and when you really look at the backstage politics and everything and how it works, there is nobody who fascinates me more in the wrestling world and annoys me at the same time and just makes me laugh more than this guy. But jokes aside, what a run, what a masterclass. Broken back, 50 years old, doesn't matter. This guy always found a way to get his way in the wrestling world. He always found a way to go over. Even when he was losing, he always found a way. What a guy. In 2009, after this, there were plans for a possible Cena versus Hogan match at WrestleMania 25, and honestly, thank God that didn't happen. Because you just know that somehow this buffoon would have found a way to win that match. He probably would have taken Charles Robinson's family hostage backstage or something and be like, Charles, you better count that 1, 2, 3 for me, dude. And he would have went over. Well, what a guy. It's your boy Pav. Thank you for watching. Thanks for supporting. I've had enough of Hulk Hogan for a long, long time. I'm out of here. Thank you guys for the love. I'll see you guys very soon. It's your boy Pav, aka Wrestling Gifts, and I'm out of here. Later, guys.